Hello everyone and welcome to this video on integrating Power BI with other applications. I am Tim Weinzappel, and in this video I am going to show how you can integrate Power Apps within your Power BI report. Now this is episode 12, and in the previous episode I actually showed an example of how you can use Power Apps embedded in a Power BI report. However, in this video we're actually going to go into the detail of actually going about creating that. So this is I'm going to have a couple of videos on this. This first one is all around integrating your Power App when you have multiple data or multiple tables, and I'll show an example of this. There's actually different variations, and this tends to be a little bit more complex, but I also find that this is probably the most common situation. So let me jump to an example. So I've got a simple table here of data, and I'll be jumping to this Power BI report in just a second. But you can see on the left side, I have got the all of this information is coming from one table. It's a project list. In my case, it's Excel. And in the other table, the commentary, and this is the data that I'm going to be using a Power App to capture, that is stored in a separate table. And in my case, it is a SharePoint list. Now, I'm doing this because I think that this will probably be a very common situation, because in a lot of cases, you might be getting data from, say, a data warehouse or other data sources that you can't you can't change or you can't connect to. So you end up having to create a second data source for your Power App, such as a SharePoint list or an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to use this because it is definitely a little bit more complex. And then in a couple other videos, I'll probably do a little simpler. But let's get started. And I'm going to jump right over to my Power BI report. So I've got my report up here. Now, as you'll see here, here's the table of data. And in my case, what I want to be able to do is allow these project managers. So this is a table of, say, sample project data that is past due. And I want my project managers to indicate comments as to why this is. So you can see the first two, this project 107 and 108, there are already some comments here. Now, the advantage to this is I don't want the project managers to have to go to a different source to capture this information. And by embedding a Power App, you can do it directly. For example, let's say I'm Larry and I'm going to update project 110 here. I can click on it, and right there to the right is my embedded Power App. And you can see how I can go ahead and say this project is getting back on track. And I can go ahead and add the new record. And then what it's going to do now is it's going to add that information. Now, I need to refresh my Power BI report for it to come on. But if I jump over to my SharePoint list, and let's go ahead and do that, you refresh it, what you're going to see is I just added this data with the Power App that's integrated. So that's the advantage to integrating a Power App directly into your Power BI report. Now, the other thing that you'll notice is, real quick here, and let me resort this, is there are already comments in these first two. So when I click on the app, what you're going to notice, it'll say edit record because there is an existing record. However, if I were to go to, say, this bottom one, there are no comments. And if I click on it, it does populate the project ID, but it says add new record. So I'm going to show how I did that. One other feature of this is, if you notice, I've got one project here selected, but if I were to deselect that and now I'm showing 7 projects, I get this warning box up here because the form can only allow one at a time. At least that's how I've set it up. So let me show you how to do this. Now, the other thing I am going to say is I normally go about doing this integration in Power BI Desktop. However, for some reason, that integration, when you are integrating a Power App into your Power BI report while using Power BI Desktop, does not seem to be working. I did find a post on a forum about this, so it does appear that others are experiencing the same issue. However, I found a workaround where if you publish your report to your Power BI service, just like I've done here, and then you edit it and do all the work in your published report by using the editor, which I'm going to go ahead and do, it does seem to be working okay. However, I am noticing some issues with the connection. So I just want to be aware of that. And hopefully Microsoft will fix that so that it does work in Power BI Desktop. But let's do this. Let's jump over. I'm going to go ahead and let's duplicate this page. And let's go ahead and remove this. And let's start from the beginning. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is add in my Power App visual. And it's over in the visualization pane. I'll find the icon, I'll add it in. And the first thing it does is it asks for a field or fields. This is going to be the information, whatever field or fields you put in here is what you want to pass over to your Power App. Now, in my case, and I do want to jump back to my data model here. And you'll notice I have these two tables and they're joined. The common identifier is between the two is a project ID. So in my SharePoint list, and if I jump over to that, let's actually jump back over to that here. And what you'll see is there is it does say title, that's the column name here. In fact, keep that in mind because when you see the coding, I am going to be referencing title, even though in my Power BI report, I've referred to it as the project ID, but it is this one right here, this field. So I'm going to jump back here. Now, the other thing you'll notice is here's my main, this is my main fact table, and this is coming from my main table. So I have the project ID field here, and then I have the project comments field in here. That's the project ID. Again, this is the title field in my SharePoint list. I just rename it in Power Query. But the one I want to use is this one because I want to be able to send over all of these records. And if I were to choose the project ID and the project comments, I actually only have 3 records. So I want to make sure, and this gets important when I want to add a new record, because when I go into these lower records, these have to be added, and I want to pass over this project ID information. So I've done that. Now it'll pop up here the minute you add a field, and again, I can add more fields, but I only need the one, and that's all I'm going to add over. It is going to ask me to choose an app or create a new. I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. And the other thing to note is at the top left here, top left corner is going to be the environment that you are building your Power App in. Now, if you're not familiar with Power Platform environments, these are essentially areas and development areas. The default one will pop up by default. I actually have a training one, so I'm going to publish this app to that environment. So just want to call that out. Let's go ahead and create new. Now, what this is going to do is this is going to kick us over to Power Apps. Now, while it's doing that, and I'm going to jump back to my report, which you can do. The other tip here, and I will probably be doing this, is you can flip between Power Apps and Power BI. This comes in really handy when you are doing this and testing it out. I want to make it, I want you to be thinking, I included the project ID. You'll see I have a table here of 7 projects. So picture a table of one column called project ID and these 7 records being sent over to Power Apps. And what it's doing is, and it does take a second here. So the app has loaded up, and you'll notice is that it has already added in a gallery. Now you'll see these are the 7 records that I have that we're showing that is being sent over to my Power App. Now the other thing too is what it creates for this integration is this control called a Power BI integration, and that is that container that holds these 7 records. Now, if you are following along or trying to do this in Power BI Desktop, when you get to this screen, a gallery, what I have been experiencing is a gallery is not actually opening up, which means it is creating this Power BI integration control, but it is not sending over any data. And for some reason, that seems to be happening in Power BI Desktop. And I'm also experiencing this a little bit when I am trying to edit an existing app over here. So just be aware that there does seem to be some issues with this integration. So, but as long as I've gone through this process, it seems to work fine. So what I don't need the gallery. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And I want you to keep in mind this P107. That is the first item in this because I'm going to be doing some coding, which will be referencing that. So let me go ahead and delete this gallery. Now, let me go ahead and just real quick. I'm not going to get real big into Power Apps, but let's go ahead and add in just a couple of, let's add at the top a blue bar at the top. And I'm going up here into Insert, and let's just add in a label. And let's just call this comment editing app. All right, let's go ahead and change that to white, just so it stands out. Now, what I want to do is I want to add in a form because a form is what you use to create or edit data or add new data. So I'm going to go ahead and do my insert, and I'm going to do an edit form. Now, what it will ask me for is a data source. In my case, my data source, again, is a SharePoint list. That SharePoint list is called project comments. So I'm going to go up here and let me connect to my SharePoint site. And there it is. Project comments is my list. And it will go ahead and automatically add in those fields. And let's just do a little cleanup here. And you'll see it brought in title, comments, and it always brings in attachments, which actually makes it great if you want to allow the user to add in attachments. We're not going to do that for purposes of this video, so I will remove that. And let's go ahead and do a little bit of quick cleanup on this that I want to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is, again, the title in my SharePoint list is called title, or the column is that I want for project ID. Let's go ahead and I'm going to relabel that. So I do need to unlock this card. And the text, if I just double click on it, I'm just going to call this project ID. The next thing is, and you'll see this, is this by default is an editable field. I don't want one to be able to edit the project IDs. So I'm going to, if I go into the properties over here in display mode, if I click on it and I go over to here, I can actually change the display mode. And if I just start typing display mode, there is one called view. That's what I want. This will make it view only. And the last thing I want to do is the comments. Let's just make it a little bigger. And I'm just clicking on these individual elements. And then I will go over here and make this a multi-line. Let's go ahead and add in a button because we are going to need to have that button. And for the onSelect property, we can just, this is a simple submit form function in Power Apps. And then when I put in the parentheses, it automatically pulls up the one I want. And so there you have it. There's our pretty much our simple editing app. Now, let's go ahead and start to add in just a little bit of coding here. And the first thing I want to do is we have to display the selected record. Again, remember, if there's a record where there's a comment that exists, I want to be able to display that, and I also want to be able to display the project ID. So let's go ahead and display that. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to form. Now, I'm selected on the form and I see data source, which is it's connecting to my SharePoint list. However, there is another property called item, which will tell it, I can tell it which item in my list. Remember, I've got this list here of three items. If there's any one of these to select. So what I'm going to do, if that, and I'm going to get to adding new ones. So let's jump back here. So let me go ahead and I've just got some code here that I'll paste in because it saved me from typing it, and I'll walk through it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm using the lookup function, and you'll notice it automatically populated. What this says is I want, for my form, I want the Power App to go and look up in the project comments SharePoint list. Remember, that's the data source that I'm saving all of my comments. Go to that list and look up where the title, again, if I go here, so go to this list and look up where the title column, so this column here, where that equals the first item in my Power BI integration.data container. Now, again, if I click here and it says it's a table, all right, I got Power BI integration.data, and if I hit the little drop down, I'm telling it, go to that SharePoint list called project comments, look up where the title equals the first item in this list, which is P107. Okay. So go there and then make that's the item that is to be displayed in the form. And you'll see it pulls up P107 and test comments. Okay. And that's the one. Now it could certainly not find one at all if I went ahead, if there isn't one, it will just be blank. It just means that there isn't one in that lookup. So, and that's okay here. However, when you're building this out, and if you have a list with some data in there, it's going to, and by following this, you're going to have an item. So that's the first thing I do. So that displays it. Now, the next thing I need to think about is, this is great because of when I'm editing a comment, there is one that is going to exist. But let's jump back over to my report. What happens if I click on P115? There is no comment. So this is where in Power Apps, forms have two different modes. You can edit an existing record, or you can add a new one. And if I go to my form and I go back up, I've got the form selected, I go back up to my properties page, there is a default mode. And you'll see here, let me click back there. It does say form edit. So by default, it's opening up in edit mode, but I want to have it open up in new mode when there is no already existing comment. So, and that's very similar to how I did the item. So let me go ahead and paste that in, and let me walk through that. So what I want is, I want to use an if statement here. This is the approach I take, where I say, okay, again, it's very similar to the item where I say but I'm using the filter function now here, where I'm saying filter the project comments. So again, go to this project comments list here, filter this list where the title is the first one of Power BI integration.data, and again, the project ID. And again, because as we are building out this app, we have this Power BI integration contains a record already, right? It contains those 7 records. And if I click on this and I drop down, so what I'm saying is filter project comments where the title equals the first row of this Power BI integration.data project ID, which is this P107. Okay, filter that. So when that table would filter, of course, it's going to find a row, right? And there's one row. So you'll see here, count rows. I'm counting the number of rows of that filter. If that equals 1, which in my case means that there is a comment that has already been added, then make the form mode to be edit. Otherwise, make it new, which means if something doesn't exist. So once I launch this application, the way this would work is if if the user clicked on, say, P-117, again, now what is happening is what is being sent over through that Power BI integration control is one record called, with the row P117, it would say filter the project comments, where that title field is P117, because remember, now that's the first record in my Power BI integration.data. And it would go here and it would not find one. So the number of rows there would be 0, which would make that into a new mode. So that's how I'm addressing that. So one more thing, let's get to the next thing. Let's go to the button. In the button, I want to be able to tell the user, are you editing an existing record? Or are you adding a new one? And it's pretty much the same thing. So let's go ahead and get the thing here. I click on my button. On select, we've already done that. And let's go to the text. There is a text property. And you'll see it says button. We're going to overwrite that. And again, I'm using that same approach, but instead of putting in the mode, this is just the text I want. So this is the, if one exists, we are editing record, and we will, and that's the property now that this coding here now will dynamically change your button text, just make it a little bit more user-friendly. And again, same exact process I've done. Filter the SharePoint list where that title equals, again, that first element. Now, Last thing, and I think this hopefully will tie all this together because I keep using this first function, and I want to show how I can actually make this work. The last thing I want to do now is what happens if somebody doesn't selects multiple records, right? It's only then going to display the first one, but that's not, I don't want that. That's not good for a user experience. So I want to pop up a box that says, it gives a warning. So here's how I do that. First of all, I'm going to go in, I'm going to go insert, and I am going to pick a rectangle, and I'm just going to cover. It doesn't matter how I place it, but I'm going to go ahead. In my case, I'm going to cover it all, and I'm going to cover it, turn it white. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a label. So I go back up here, insert a label, and now this is where I can do the label. And let's say you must select a specific record to activate. Do that, and let's, of course, let's make it italicized and centered, and let's just kind of resize it. Okay, now I've got this. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to go over here to my tree view, and I'm going to select that label I just created and the rectangle. I'm holding down my shift key. I've selected both of them. I right click and I go to group. I'm going to call this warning. So I've created a group. Now what I want to do is I want to make this visible or not visible. So it's essentially a cover to cover the form. And what I want to do is, and this coding is a little simpler, is count the number of rows in that Power BI integration.data control. If it equals 1, which means only one record was selected, then have I'm sorry. Now, you know what? I put it in the wrong. I got ahead of myself. I've got to switch to, again, I'm going to step back here. I have selected the warning box, and I need to go up here to the visible property. I was about to change the X property, which is positioning. I go to the visible, you'll see there's true. If I change this to false, it goes away. So I'm going to use a toggle switch now, an if statement, which basically says if the number of rows in that Power BI integration data is equal to 1, which means one record has been selected, then make the visible property false. Otherwise, make your visible property true, which means you make this appear. And for some reason, I got moved over. So now let's go ahead and save this and jump back over and test it. Now, here's another little trick. First of all, when you, let's go ahead and save this. Let's call this edit comment app, and I'm going to call it version 2 because I probably already created a previous version. So I'm going to give it a second here to save. Okay. First time you save an app, it does publish it, but as you make changes, there is a publish button here. So it's very similar to Power BI. You have to republish it. But I'm not going to close out of Power Apps. I want to leave this up. I'm just going to jump back over to here. And now that I've done that, it opens up. I do get a little prompt here. I'm just going to say, okay, skip this. Now you'll notice 7 records. The warning box is there. The form is actually underneath that. And remember, we're telling it to show the first item, which if I were to hide this box, this first record would show. But again, I've got that warning box. So let's go ahead and let's select P108. Again, now because of that warning box, because of that if statement we put in, this goes away. And now you see P108 and you see edit record. Remember, we're in edit mode because one already exists. Let's go down to P115. And you'll notice that it says add new record. Problem is, I want this project ID. I can't edit it because I purposely made that non-editable. What I forgot to add in is, boy, I'd like to add in this to come in. So let's jump back over to my Power App. And I'm going to go ahead and just click on that. What I forgot to do in this data card is put in the default property. So I'm going to go back here to my default mode. And again, this is very similar. I'm sorry, this is my project ID. This one. This is very similar to some of remember the filtering that we did. And let me basically walk through this again. I'm going through filter again, the project comments list, where the title is the first element of that Power BI integration.data control. And then if when you filter that down, the number of rows is 1, then make it the default, which means pull in that default item, that default project ID. Otherwise, you need to add in, here's the value I want for the default, which is the first item from that Power BI integration.data control that is being passed over. And again, remember, I have that warning box so that every time that this form should be visible is only when there is one record. Now, again, this filtering is determining whether that record exists in the comments or not. So that will now do that. The other little trick is always good. Let's add some kind of little version, just because I want to make sure I am working on the newer version. So I will go ahead and save this. Don't forget to publish. I will do that. And I will jump back over to my report. It may take a second for that publish to go through. Sometimes if you just jump out and jump back in, and it will reload. And let's see if, let's give it a second here. My app was not coming up, but it was simply a timing issue, because it took a few minutes for it to publish. So again, jumping back here, if I click on one, this is an existing one. Remember, edit record. Now let me jump down to P117, and we've just added it again. Now the default shows up, because remember, we're saying if it's a new record, add in the first item from my Power BI integration control, and you'll see my first item is P117, which matches up there. And again, you'll see that little V2. That's what I actually added in. So always add these little version numbers that will help you. So there you have it. I mean, that's pretty much one way to integrate your Power BI with your Power App, and then start to connect that data. I will be continuing some more videos on this integration. So again, if you like this video, please subscribe, please hit that like button. And again, thank you so much for watching.